Welcome to the Holding Time podcast, where we share inspiring stories from remarkable mothers who participated in the Holding Time project in Bradford. Each episode, we explore their unique breastfeeding stories, the highs, the lows, the challenges and the triumphs. Whether you're expecting, a new parent, or simply curious, we invite you to hear from these resilient warrior women as they share their experiences. Find out more at holdingtime.org.
My name's Sinead. I've got one baby boy. He's 6 months old now. I gave birth in Calderdale Royal Infirmary by caesarean section, and I live in Bradford.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Understand that you did the writing workshops.
Yeah, I'm not really much of a creative writer, so I didn't realise it was creative writing when I first signed up to it. So when I was sat there, I was like, oh, I'm not right good at this, but I gave it a go.
Good for you.
The reason that I signed up was because I got to like a weekly feeding clinic, and the lactation consultant there said to me, she's like, have you heard about this? Blah, blah, blah. I think it'd be really good for you to share your story because you know, it started off like quite negative and it's ended quite positive. So, you know, you can share your story, help other mums. So I was like, oh, all right, okay. So I was just sort of thinking, it was just like, you know, like this is what happened, this is what I did, and look where we are now, you know, you should do it, give it a go. And then when we got there and I realised it was creative writing, I'm like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. But
Well done for sticking at it, you know. A lot of people would have just gone, oh, that's it, I'm off. So well done.
I thought about it.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I mean, I'm not the sort of person to do that type of creative activity. You know, I really admire women who do that. I think I can see it's hugely beneficial, but, you know, it takes real commitment, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely didn't come naturally. Like, I feel like a lot of the other mums around the room, like you could see, like when Rachel would go, right, 5 minutes, timer, off you go, and like everyone would be like, shh, and I'd be sat there like, oh. What do I write? So it definitely didn't come natural, but I feel like by the end of it, I did get better.
Well, what's better? It's just you did it, you enjoyed it, maybe you made some friends or you know,
Yeah.
got something out of it. I mean, that's all it's for, you know, it's not a
Yeah.
competition of any
I think
kind.
for me, it was nicer hearing the other mum stories and, you know, hearing like some parts that are really relatable, some parts that I think, oh God, that's awful. Like, I'm glad I didn't go through that. And it was nice because every single mum sort of had a different birth story and had a different time afterwards with feeding. And so it was nice to sort of see the variety.
Maybe it kind of helps you put your story into a context that helps you find a place for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Because the
was,
way that breastfeeding is presented and birth is kind of like there's two things that might happen. One is that it's going to be this amazing birth and you're going to have this fantastic experience. And the other is that it's going to be terrible and it's all going to go wrong. And it's the same with breastfeeding. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be really easy, or, oh, it's all going to go terrible and you're just going to use formula. And that
yeah.
is a binary way of looking at it. And actually, the women I interview, and certainly myself, my own experience was it was really much more kind of grey in terms of, yes, personally, I had a really fast birth, but I was in loads of shock afterwards and I felt really traumatized. You know, it was like
Yeah.
vaginal birth, which I constantly ran into people who were like, oh, I didn't have a natural birth and I feel really bad. I'll be like, don't worry about it. Mine was awful. I mean, you were to sort of give the outline of it, it sounded like the ideal birth, you know, so
Yeah.
it wasn't the ideal. It was awful though, you know, so I mean, it must have affected me because I've ended up doing 10 years of this work.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have known exactly how it affected me. And I think one of the things I notice is that because of that binary thing, we think if it seemed to have gone okay, we shouldn't complain.
Yeah.
You know, like, what have I got to moan about type thing. And then if it went really badly, sometimes there's a feeling of, well, I got something wrong or I did something bad or I failed, you know. Like there's a winner loser kind of dynamic going on.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt in the beginning because he wouldn't latch. And I was just like, this is something that should just happen. You know, you're supposed to just be able to, they're supposed to just do it? Like, why can't I do it? And so like massive felt like I was definitely failing because I was like, why can't I feed my baby? You know what I mean? And like I researched so much about it, put so much effort into it, and it just still wasn't working. But again, I feel like when I was researching it, I knew it was hard, as in like once you were in it, to stick with it. I knew I'd researched and I found that out, but I didn't, in the research, I didn't find out how many issues you can have with latching, with, like anything that can go wrong, or like, there's nothing wrong, like no, like he had no tongue tie, no, there was nothing wrong with my nipple shape. There was nothing wrong with anything, but he just wouldn't latch. And there was no sort of, I don't know, there was nothing ever that I found out about that until it happened. So when it did, I was like, what on earth do I do? Um,
Mm. You had a
so yeah,
mystery problem, like one that's
yeah,
not in the textbooks.
yeah,
It's difficult with learning something from textbooks, though, isn't it? I mean, when I say textbooks, I mean websites, but that kind of a lot of the reason why I started this project was because I felt that a lot of the problems maybe that I had, even though I did have lots of textbook problems, I felt like there was a central problem that I couldn't put my finger on. It was like there was
yeah,
something else, like there's something else that made it really hard, and I couldn't work out what it was. I kind of started to think that thing that I couldn't grasp was much more about my own discomfort with breastfeeding. I just didn't
yeah.
feel comfortable with it. I'd never been breastfed. I never saw breastfeeding.
I was exactly the same.
I loved dolls when I was a kid. I always fed them with bottles.
Yeah,
Just found breastfeeding weird, and I found it really hard to get past that. It was like this huge barrier psychologically that I couldn't get over. And I think it made it really hard for me to do it in a way that I was relaxed, you know?
yeah.
Were you breastfed? Did your mum breastfeed you?
No, she said that she tried, but I don't think she understood like the colostrum. Obviously, she thought that as soon as baby's born, you've just got loads of milk, and obviously, when she looked, there wasn't milk, and she thought, well, my baby needs feeding, and she tried, but because there wasn't milk, like she said that there wasn't an education about it, like there is now. She was worried and put me then put me on formula once she'd sort of seen that there was no milk.
There wasn't the same kind of support back then. Like I talk to women, who were born in even from the 80s to the noughties. It seems like they wanted women to breastfeed, but there was no there's no support to do it, or they had to kind of find their own support, or I don't know. It doesn't seem like there was the same infrastructure that there is now, expertise.
Yeah, my mum was amazed at how much I knew about it, from what I'd researched and how much I'd been told by the midwives and how much support I was getting for it. And she just said there was nothing like this when I was born. But we've sort of learned on the journey together, like through his struggles.
Oh, it's nice that your mum has been supportive. And that's
Yeah,
how my mum, to be honest. My mum didn't breastfeed me. I was born in the 70s. I mean, at that time, they used to just take the baby off the mother and like wheel them into another room.
yeah,
So we were all given formula. And I mean, breastfeeding was something you had to kind of do by special dispensation. Not only was it not encouraged, but it was almost physically a bit difficult to do.
yeah. My mum said it. She just said that the only thing that they got with the feeding was she didn't know whether it was a midwife or health visitor, but she just said that someone came out basically like held me onto my mum's boob, like proper twisted my face and said she could see the thumbprint in my face and was like, oh, she's not latching, she's lazy. And then my mum like, right, that's it. I'm not doing any of this. Like so
Yeah. And actually, you do find that sometimes women from that generation, they loved formula feeding and they just didn't see the point of breastfeeding. And so it varies whether or not they're supportive of their daughters or their daughter-in-laws, because
yeah.
they had their own experience. And I think obviously breastfeeding we now know is really important, but it is hard for a generation that wasn't breastfed to learn to breastfeed. Even though I can't say this scientifically at all, and it's totally my own theory, I completely admit it's my own theory, but having spoken to so many women, I do notice that women who who were breastfed, it's not that they don't have problems, they do have problems, but there's something about the way that they tackle those problems
Yeah.
that feels like they've got an intuitive connection to breastfeeding from being breastfed, you know?
Yeah.
So I think when you weren't breastfed, you're always working with that sort of like starting from square one.
Hmm.
And educating yourself is a brilliant way of trying to prepare. But like you say, there's some stuff you can't prepare for.
Yeah, and like I think there's a lot of stuff that you do learn from personal experience or speaking to other people and hearing their personal experience. Like there's so much that I've learned from doing that, which is obviously something that is so difficult to do if none of your family have breastfed and none of your friends are having babies, and so you're just really thrown in at the deep end.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing here. I mean, essentially, we're sort of artificially constructing that kind of multiple narrative learning journey for mothers so they can
Mm,
learn from all of us, because it doesn't exist. Like you say, you're not seeing it, you don't know anyone who's done it. And also, you might just spend all your life, all your adult life, just working and then
yeah,
become a mother. So you're not even really around babies.
no,
So it's a learning curve, isn't it? So take me
yeah.
back to your birth. You said you had a C-section. Was that a planned C-section or an emergency C-section?
No, it was emergency. Near the end of my pregnancy, I was getting extra scans because my BMI was higher. And then they said that baby was small, so I was getting extra scans then again because of that. And then like it was sort of consultant led, and he seemed to think that I'd lost some of my waters, and like there was this big hoo-ha about it. And he said, right, you need to be induced today.
Oh,
I was a couple of days before 38 weeks. So
right.
obviously I wasn't expecting that. And because I was at Huddersfield, I went to the actual hospital and they said they did like a test to see whether my waters had gone, and they said that the test had come back negative. So basically, don't listen to what the consultant said. He didn't know what he's on about.
Oh, God.
So then I spoke to a doctor there, and then she said, because obviously I didn't want to be induced. Then she was like, if you don't want to be induced, then you don't have to be. I'm like, no, thank you. And we booked an induction for then 3 days past my due date, which obviously is earlier than you would normally get induced. I think you would normally get
Yeah,
7 days past or 10 days past,
yeah.
but 3 days past, and that's what they agreed on. So 3 days past, went in for my induction, and basically nothing worked. It put me into labour. I was contracting every 3 minutes, but I wasn't dilating. And they tried absolutely everything. And 9 days later, I was still contracting, but still nothing. They managed to break my waters at 1 centimetre. And I was on a hormone drip for 14 hours, and I still, after the 14 hours, still was only 1 centimetre. So they were like, yeah, your uterus is like so tired that we're going to have to do a section. Otherwise, like it's not going to, like close back up.
The 9 days that you were contracting,
Yeah.
were you in pain?
Yes. Yeah. And I was holding out because I knew I was only 1 centimetre, and I'm thinking I've got so long to go. Like I can't start with pain relief yet.
It's upsetting to think of you for 9 days going through labor. I see the
Yeah.
longest I've really ever heard. I mean, I have heard of 5 days, but I've never heard of 9 days. It's extraordinary.
When I got booked in for that initial, you need to be induced today, I got given obviously an information pack, and that said that the most it could be would be sort of 5 days. To
Yeah.
expect it up to 5 days. And I remember reading that information pack, and I was telling Paul, my partner, and I said, wow, imagine like going through this and this and this and this, and then going through all of that. And then at the end, still having to have an emergency section. I'm like, what an unlucky person that must be. And that is literally what happened. They kept telling me I was 1 centimetre, 1 centimetre. I got to two, and I'm like, oh, we're getting there. I said, can you go back? They were like, no, you can't go back. You can't go back. I went back. I went back to
Really?
one. Yeah.
Wow.
And then they tried like this balloon pessary, and then they're like, right, Sinead, we've never seen this not work. This has to work. I've never seen it not work. And it didn't work. Like I got a thrush, I got a UTI from all the hormones and everything that was just being going on. Because at Calderdale, your other half isn't allowed to stay with you. They have to go home at night. And at night, is I think it's oxytocin that brings on your contractions. So obviously at night it's all calm, it's dark, you feel more relaxed, and all the contractions were so bad at night. But I was on my own every single time, and then during the day they'd sort of just wean off. Like they were still there, but not half as bad. And then in the end, we went in for the section, and I think my body was exhausted. So I felt like really sick. I was being sick, and I just felt so out of it. Like I wasn't bothered about having a section. They said, oh, maybe we're gonna have to consider that. I said, it's fine. You know what I mean? Let's go for it. And I wasn't worried about that at all. But I feel like the experience was taken away from me because I felt so unwell. I was sort of going in and out of consciousness. And then I know now I'd hemorrhaged. So because I was losing so much blood, that's why I was going in and out, but I didn't understand why at the time.
Was that during the C-section that you hemorrhaged?
Yeah, yeah. And so it took him a lot longer to sort of like, get me back together. But I don't know, I didn't know how long it should normally take because obviously I've never had one before. And because it was emergency, nothing was explained to me. Obviously, it was just, we need to go now. But I remember feeling so in and out, in and out, in and out. My lady that does my lashes, she'd had a section and she said to me, like it's brilliant. They bring them out and they show you what you've got because I didn't know what I was having either. So like that was my thing. I wanted Paul to announce what we had. So we had, even though it was emergency, I was like, please hold him up, like hold the baby up so that he can see, what we've got and tell me. And like even when he was doing that, I was just so, I don't know, it just wasn't the experience that I thought it was going to be because I felt so unwell. All of that just because I'm a very positive person, and it was just really, really hard to sort of, I don't know, it was really hard to take. It was upsetting. Through the 9 days, everyone was like, once you get your baby in your arms, it'll be fine, it'll be so worth it. And like I never got that moment, you know what I mean? So it were a bit bittersweet. And then afterwards, then obviously he wouldn't latch. I couldn't, because I was unwell, I couldn't like get him dressed for the first time. I couldn't hold him properly, so I couldn't latch him properly. And then I now know from speaking to the consultants that all of that basically affected my milk supply.
Well, the blood loss is the blood loss.
Everything,
Yeah.
the blood loss, the trauma, and
Well, all of it. Yeah.
the long drawn out process,
Oh, yeah.
she said affected my milk supply.
Oh, 100%. I mean, to be honest, if you had a marvelous fast birth and hemorrhaged, you'd have a problem with your milk supply, most likely.
Yeah,
If you have a 9-day labor, oh God, it makes me so sad hearing that story. I mean, it's brutal. What you went through was brutal. And I'm glad you're a really positive person, but I hope you take good care of
yeah.
yourself. How old is your son?
He's 6 months now.
Okay, so you've had a 6-month period to kind of try to integrate that into your psyche.
Yeah, like I say, I've only sort of gone over it just when we were doing the writing workshops. I've sort of just, like whenever anyone asks, I was like, oh yeah, I had 9 days of labour, ended in a section, but it's fine, like and then that's sort of it,
Yeah.
like when people say, oh, you're gonna have another, and and Paul always says no. Like it were too traumatic. And everyone goes, traumatic, traumatic for you. Like, what about Sinead?
I was gonna ask how was it for him? Because actually it's something that's very overlooked is
No
how,
one is there for the dads.
yeah, that
Yeah,
experience is for fathers. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, partners, birth partners, but someone who's there that loves you very much, that's watching you. Yeah, I mean, I've only just met you and I feel really upset, and that's okay. That's why I only do one interview a day because I do hear lots of stories and they are really painful. And sometimes it's like the mother-in-law, sometimes it's coming from
yeah,
like random places. But when it's in a hospital and it's such a, yeah, I don't understand why the hell they let you go for 9 days. I feel really upset about
yeah.
why did they let you go so long? I mean, nearly twice as long as what is recommended. Why?
In the end, I think I was there 5 or 6 days. I think it was day 6. And I was so upset. Obviously, I had thrush, I had a UTI. I was so uncomfortable. You can't sleep properly in the hospital, anyways. Paul had to go home every night, which made me feel so upset because we've never spent a night away from each other. And then being pregnant and about to give birth, like, I didn't want him to go. And, but at BRI, they can stay. But at Calderdale, you can't, but my doctor's was in Huddersfield. That's why I gave birth at Calderdale.
Yeah, all of that is really difficult. And you're 25 years old is like, you haven't even got enough life experience to be, I don't know how they expected you to do that, to do all of that. I
Yeah.
don't understand it. I
But
really
in
find
the
it quite
end,
difficult.
I was so upset, and they were like, "What can we do to help?" And I'm like, "Can I just go home?" And they were like, "Yeah, of course you can go home." And I'm like, why have you kept me here then? Like, they're like, of course you can go home if you get, if you get any reduced movements, blah, blah, blah. Like, what you need to do is ring us every morning, see whether they've got a place in the labour ward. As soon as you've got a place in the labour ward, you can come in and have your baby. So I'm like, right. So then I rang the next day and they were like, no, we've no place. So I was like, right, okay. Then I rang the next day, and all this time I'm still contracting, but I'm just sort of going off paracetamol because I was holding myself off for the real labor. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to go in heavy with the pain, and then obviously when it come, then not really have anything to build on. And then in the end, I had reduced movements, and I went in. Like I was saying, this has been so long. Like I know that you're checking the baby and the baby's okay, but like this is too long. Like how long is too long? How much longer can this go on? Like I was 11 days overdue, so I was like, I'm nearly 2 weeks over. Surely it can't go any longer than this. And like if we're still trying to induce, it can take 5 days. That'd bring me over the 2 weeks over. Like how? And they said, oh no, don't worry about the 2 weeks. Just as long as labour has started by the 2 weeks over, which yours has. And I'm like, surely that can't be. I don't know. Like I would just, but they basically said, we get what you're saying, but we don't have the space. So, and I was just like, all right, okay. So like, what do you do? You know what I mean? Like
So they kept you in labour for 9 days because they didn't have, but at that point, were you saying that were you still thinking that you were going to have a vaginal birth, or were you like,
yes,
give me the
no, I
C-section, get me
no,
out of
well,
here?
yeah, because then they said, oh, we can start over again if you want, as in start through all of the hormones and everything that Jordan. And I nearly swore at him because I'm like, what? And I said, no. I said, and they're like, well, what do you want us to do? I said, well, I'd rather go for a section because clearly this isn't working. And they're like, oh, well, we want to try this first. And then because I had the reduced movements and it was the third time I'd had reduced movements, then they basically pushed to the labour ward and said, we need to get this going now because she's been in this long and she's had this much. And then obviously I've started on that and then it still didn't work. But it was like I really had to, they sort of put me in labour and then just like just left me. I don't know. And then we really had to push to get into the labour ward. And then once we were in the labour ward, I was looked after really well. And I had three people stay in the room with me from the moment that I was in there to the moment that I left to go up the section. So I wasn't left
Yeah. So how long were you in the labour ward then?
for 14 hours.
Oh,
I was on
okay.
the
So
hormone drip for 14 hours.
right. So you were in the labour ward for 14 hours, and you were in hospital before that being
Yeah.
induced, and you went home for a period of time in the middle.
Went home for 2 days, yeah. But obviously still contracting every sort of 3 minutes and all through the night. And so,
Are you going to
yeah,
do a birth review? Like, will you do that process? Is there the option to do like birth stories, or to go and do a review with them about what your birth was and why it
I'm
went
not
the way it went?
sure. I
Well,
didn't know that
most
were a thing.
hospitals offer that, and you could ask the midwifery team if that's available at Calderdale. I would think it is. I mean, I think it's available everywhere. I certainly do interview lots of women who've done it, and that sometimes will help you understand what was going on. Although it sounds like mainly what was going on is they didn't have space for you.
Yeah, because when I did actually have my baby and got onto the, like, I don't know what they call it, but the aftercare ward, it was right next to the induction ward. So when I was walking, you have to walk through the induction ward to get to it. And they were like, are you still here? I was like, yeah, I had my baby this morning. And they were just like, oh my goodness. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think like even they were shocked. But I didn't know that was a thing that you could do that.
Yeah, it is a thing. And I think it's helpful for you to process the experience. So I'll have a look and see what there is. Going on to what, I can see the context of like you trying to breastfeed.
Yeah.
It's going to be, the next stage. I'm amazed that you kept going because you already had so much stacked against you. You lost blood, you'd had this incredibly long labor. So did you try breastfeeding in the hospital or?
Yeah, I tried breastfeeding in hospital. I'm sort of like bigger chested, so they said that it is more difficult when you bigger chested, sort of a smaller baby. I'd put my little finger in his mouth. I'd put a syringe in his mouth because I was syringe feeding colostrum. Put a little finger in his mouth, and he'd suck that. He'd suck the syringe. Put my nipple in his mouth. He'd just sit there with it in his mouth. It wouldn't suck. And it,
Interesting,
and
yeah.
I don't know why. And I was asking them, and all they were saying was, it's new to you, so it's new to him as well. He's learning, and obviously he'll get it. What I was doing more like hand expressing colostrum and getting it into a syringe, and then syringe feeding him, and basically just doing that as much as we could. We did in hospital 2 top-ups of like SMA formula, like just sort of 2 10 ml top-ups.
Yeah. He was probably tired, don't you think, from that long
Yeah,
labor?
he did. He just slept. He was born at 6:45 in the morning, and like I say, I couldn't do that first feed properly. I was laying in bed, and I remember a midwife literally like squeezing my breast and trying to hand express some colostrum so they could get it in a syringe because Paul had gone home to get mine to bring in, and I remember her squeezing that. Trying to get some out to give him a feed, and that must be in like I don't know 10 o'clock maybe. So that golden hour as well that you're supposed to have, you're supposed to feed your baby in that golden hour to get like a good, and didn't have that. It was sort of more than 2 hours, and then he just slept. And I obviously it's my first baby. It was Paul's first baby, so I think I had a shower, like I had something to eat, and I'm thinking, kept checking on him. He was fine, and we got moved on to the aftercare ward, and I just said, when should I feed him? And they're like, oh, when's the last fed? And I said, oh, like this morning. They're like, and I'm like, well, he's just slept. And so he must have been so tired. In them early weeks, he would just sleep. I had to set alarms every 3 hours to get him up and wake him. And like now you say that, I didn't put two and two together, but yeah, that must be what it is. He was just knackered from everything that gone on.
Thank you for listening to the Holding Time podcast. We're grateful to everyone involved in this project, including our partners and funders, Bradford District Care Trust and Arts Council England and Better Place Bradford, and all the incredible mothers and families who made it all possible. For more information, visit holdingtime.org. The link is in the episode description. Please like, follow, or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And consider sharing this podcast to help raise awareness and support for breastfeeding.